Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, August 6th, 2020 school committee meeting. It is 7:41. I am now reconvening this meeting into regular session as we have just adjourned from executive session. The first item on the agenda is the July 9th meeting minutes. Are there any questions or comments about those? Nope. With that, is there a motion to approve the July 9th regular session meeting minutes?
Moved by Dawn.
Seconded by Catherine.
Andy.
Moved by Dawn, seconded by Catherine. Roll call vote. Ms. Naborski,
Yes.
Ms. Koshin,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead,
Yes.
Dr. Savard,
Yes.
Mrs. Listevnik,
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. Thank you. Okay. This evening, I am actually going to, skip over oral communication as we have a lengthy meeting and we have a lot to go through. So I'm sure you are okay with that. I am also going to just ask Mr. Boudet to please let Mr. Ahern in, and I am changing the agenda for a moment. I'm just bringing up personnel. I'm going to introduce you to Travis Ahern, our new town administrator. He was hired on July 20th, and he is joining us, and I just want you all to be able to introduce yourself and say hello. So Keith, was he able to get in?
I'm in.
Right there.
Hi, Travis. How are you?
Good. How are y'all doing?
Welcome to the school committee meeting. I just wanted, I appreciate you jumping out of another meeting to join us. So if you wanted to take a minute just to say hello, and then I'm going to let the committee introduce themselves.
Great. So this is now my third week in Holliston. I got a chance to sit down with Dr. Kuska and Keith Bidet, but just trying to get around and introduce myself to everybody. I know you guys are working very hard right now, so I'll be quick. I just wanted to say a couple of things about myself. My wife and I and two children live in Wayland. My wife is an educator. She works at the Boston Higashi School. I had a lot of experience working with the schools in Danvers, which was my last municipal experience before Holliston, with the superintendent there, Lisa Dana, and actually another Keith, who is their assistant superintendent for business operations. I also worked on the school building committee there. They were granted a project through the MSBA, so I was involved in that project and then sat on the school committee, building committee for their project as the procurement seat. And I think I'm looking forward to working with the schools and supporting the school committee in your mission.
Great. We look forward to working with you. Dawn, do you want to say hi?
Hi, Travis. Welcome. Really looking forward to working with you. I've been part of the Holliston community for about 17 years. I'm a working mom. I have 5 kids in the district, and thank you very much.
Catherine.
Hi, Travis. I'm new here too. I've been on the school committee for a little over a month, so you're not alone in learning the waters real quick. I've got 2 kids in the system, and I've been in Holliston for just about 7 years.
Cynthia.
Hi, Travis. Nice to meet you. I've been on the school committee for about 5 years now. I have 3 kids in the district, and I've lived here for about 10 years. So thank you very much for joining us.
Anne Louise.
Sorry, I'm sneaking my mask off. Apologies. I am calling in from Indiana, where I have just dropped off my youngest child for her first year in college. I have been in the district since quite literally the day that I delivered my first child. We moved while I was in the hospital. That was excellent. So I've been here 24 years. And this is going to be my 9th year on the school committee. And so welcome. I think you will love Holliston. It is a wonderful community, an engaged community, and we're delighted to have you. So thank you so much.
Lisa?
You said y'all, Travis. Where are you from?
Oh no, I think it slipped. I'm from New York.
Oh man. Okay, I'm from Texas, so I have an ear up for that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
I'm a transplant, but I have been here for 11 years in Holliston, and this is I'm going into my 6th year on school committee, and I have one son in the district going into 5th grade. Welcome to Holliston.
Andy.
Hi, Travis. Welcome. Andy Morton. I have lived here in town for 7 years. I'm going to take Lisa's word for it. I came on at the same time as she did, and I have 2 kids in the district. So welcome. Certainly have a big job ahead of you starting remotely. So good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Khan.
Hi, Travis. My name's David Keim. I am the principal of the Miller School, grade 3 to 5 school. Been in district for 21 years and also live in town.
Dr. Slaney.
Hi, Travis. I'm Jamie. Nice to meet you. I'm the Placentino principal, pre-K to 2, and I just finished my 5th year in the district.
Nicole.
Good evening. It's nice to meet you. I'm Nicole Bottomley. I'm the principal of the high school. I'm starting my 11th year in Holliston and my 8th as principal.
Mr. Jordan.
Hi, Travis. I'm David Jordan. I'm the principal of the middle school. I am starting my 8th year here in Holliston. Nice to meet you.
It's me.
And Travis, did you say you already met with Peter Vitello? I don't want to. Have you met Peter yet?
Hi, Travis. I'm Peter Vitello. I'm the assistant superintendent. I've been, this is my 14th year in Holliston. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, Travis, I know you have that other meeting to jump back onto. It was a pleasure introducing you to the team, and we look forward to working with you.
We will, I'm sure, cross paths soon when you're less busy, hopefully.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night.
And with that, because the administrators are back with us tonight, hello all again, it's Groundhog Day. I am going to, Peter, are you okay with us bumping your presentation down to, okay, I didn't know, I hope you had that discussion. Okay, so we're gonna go right into the new business of the district reopening plans, and I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Kuska.
Thank you, Stacy. So I understood from conversations and communication that I received today that there were still some questions about the specifics of the high school plan in particular, because I think Nicole having gone at the end, this seems to happen a lot. We end up at the high school last, and sometimes a lot of the details are done in the other plans, and it didn't seem that it was a need to elaborate. But since there were still some questions, I did ask Nicole if she could start today instead of going last, with just a few more details, because I think parents were having a hard time wrapping their head around what the schedule looks like and what we are proposing in the model, even though there are still a lot of details to flesh out later. So if you could take a few minutes to do that. I did invite the other principals. I'm not foreseeing that there might be questions for them, but I just thought, just in case there was a quick question before they exit, because I did promise them that they might be able to have a late dinner with their families tonight. So Nicole, if you could jump into a couple of slides that you were going to share with us.
Sure. Keith or Stacy, do you need to make me a co-host, or we're good? Okay. All right. Give me one minute then. Can you all see my screen? If you're giving me thumbs up, I can't see you because...
Yes, we can see
Okay,
it.
perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
That's the problem with that. So while I am presenting this and sharing, I do have the full screen on, so I won't be able to see you if you are trying to ask any questions as we go through. So please unmute yourself and let me know. Otherwise, I won't see if you're trying to wave your hand and ask me to pause. I appreciate the opportunity to present again this evening. I know that the last few nights there have been a tremendous amount of details shared by all 4 building principals, as well as a number of other individuals in the district. There are so many details and nuances to these plans that we have been working around the clock on. And I know that it can be incredibly overwhelming, the amount of information that's shared. I also appreciate that Dr. Kuska did mention that oftentimes when it gets to the high school in terms of presenting, as I've mentioned a couple times the last few evenings, my colleagues have done such a wonderful job describing the details that pertain to the entire district. So we haven't really gone into too many details in terms of cleaning or facilities, health and safety protocols, because those are really consistent throughout the district as they should be. However, I do understand that there are still pieces of the high school model that people have questions about. And I also recognize that as much as we have been here the last few nights, not everybody else is tuned in every single night, nor would I expect them to. And so I think that there are probably pieces that have been explained, but maybe not been viewed by everyone. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity to go through some of the pieces of the high school. I'm going to run through a few aspects of the model that are some of the bigger pieces of the model, and then a couple of different pieces that I know we've received some questions on. And then, of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that, that school committee members may have. So I want to start by just describing the hybrid model. So similar to the middle school and to grades 4 and 5 for Miller, our students will be in 2 cohorts, so Cohort A and Cohort B. On Mondays and Tuesdays, Cohort A will be in person, while Cohort B is remote. On Thursdays and Fridays, Cohort A will be remote, while Cohort B is in person. And then on Wednesdays, every other week, it rotates. So for example, the first week, it may be that Cohort A is in person 2 days and remote 3 days, whereas the following week, they may then be in person for 3 days. So it's 2 days in person, followed by the next week, 3 days in person. And it will rotate like that as long as we're in the hybrid model. And I think one of the pieces that we've stressed throughout all of the presentations is that all of this will fluctuate as we are provided with up-to-date information on cases within Massachusetts or within Holliston, and as we adjust our models accordingly based on the up-to-date medical information or other aspects that will affect the hybrid model or remote or more in person as we move along. One of the questions that I think has come up a few times is really, what do those first few days look like? And why is there a need for high school students to begin in a remote environment as opposed to jumping in day 1 in person? And I do want to clarify, I know I said this last night to clarify, but for the audience who may be different than last night, I do want to clarify that when we were first describing this plan on Monday, that really when I had mentioned 1 to 2 weeks, that wasn't at all to give the impression that the first 2 full weeks were going to be students in remote learning. It really is more like a few days. And the reason I say this is because I know the calendar is one of the agenda items for this evening for school committee. When the school calendar is solidified and we have a sense of what our first day of school for students will be, then we'll have a better idea of exactly how many days students may be beginning in remote. So for example, if students begin their first day of school on a Tuesday, we may say then Tuesday through Friday of that week, the students will be in remote. So whether they're in Cohort A or Cohort B, or our students who are going to be full-time remote, all of those students together, it may just be those first 4 days. If we don't start until later in the week, if we don't start till Thursday or Friday, then it may wrap into the second week as far as a couple of days. Again, I just wanted to clarify that because I know there have been a number of questions about that. What I really want to focus on, though, is the relationship building piece and why it's so critical to have students start in a remote learning environment for everyone. I want to describe a little bit about what it's like those first few days of the school year. In a normal year, so putting aside COVID-19, putting aside a hybrid model, putting aside everything that feels different about this year. In a normal year, there's a tremendous amount of energy, and anxiety and angst and questions and uncertainty coming into the start of the school year for both students and for faculty. Students, as they're coming in, they are full of energy. They're excited to be back in the building. They're excited to have their classes, but they also want to know, where am I going to sit in my class? Will I have an assigned seat? Will I not? What is this going to feel like in the classroom? What are the expectations of the teacher? What are the procedures and protocols within the classroom? How do I access my materials? Are they going to be online through Google Classroom? And I apologize, my 3-year-old, it's his bedtime, so it's my turn this evening to have a soundtrack in the background of little giggles and voices. So I will continue on, just pretend like that's not happening. So, you know, as I was saying, students are coming in and they're full of these questions. They're full of energy and anxiety about what is this going to feel like and look like in the classroom? Will they have friends in their classes that they know? Are they going to connect with their teacher? Are they going to connect with the learning experiences? And similarly, our teachers are feeling the same way. They're coming in with that same level of energy and excitement, regardless of whether it's their first year teaching or their 30th year teaching. If you speak to teachers who have been in the classroom for years and years and years, they still have those butterflies coming in the first day. And they're looking at, what is this going to feel like in the classroom? Am I going to know students from previous years? Will students respond well to the learning experiences that I've designed? Will they follow my procedures and protocols? Do I need to adjust things based on the students that are sitting in front of me? What experiences did they have the previous year that they're bringing with them to that class? All of that is swirling those first few days. And most of our teachers, those first few days, they're not jumping in day one to content. They're spending time building relationships. They're doing icebreakers in the classroom. They're going over expectations. They're setting norms. They're starting to build those critical relationships that are going to be the foundation of the success of that class. All of that is independent of COVID and independent of any of the challenges of this year. Added this year is the fact that our students will be in a hybrid model and they'll be separated into a cohort A, cohort B. Cohort A, if they're in person, will be in the classroom in front of them. And cohort B will be through Zoom or through Google Meet, most likely though through Zoom. And they will be Zooming into the classroom. So now there's the added challenge that teachers have of not only all of those pieces that I just described, but also the challenge of navigating the students who are in front of them, as well as the students who are online, and all of the new protocols and health regulations and the fact that students are going to be wearing masks and the questions students are going to have about cleaning and about protocols around just traffic flow in the building. To ask our teachers day one to come into that environment and to be able to be incredibly successful from day one, I don't think that's setting them up for the best success. So looking at, if we start all students in that remote environment, we've now taken out that incredible challenge of the fact that there's 2 separate cohorts. By having all of those students start in a remote environment together, the teacher now is able to focus on developing those relationships, doing an icebreaker with the students because everybody is together in that environment. And for the students who are online, they feel connected. They feel part of that community of the classroom, and they feel like they're on the same playing field as everybody else in that class. And so I wanted to take a little extra time to explain that, to describe that, and talk about why that's so critical, because those first few days, if we're able to help support teachers and students to set them up for success, ultimately those in-person experiences and those remote learning experiences are going to be far better than if teachers and students feel like they're playing catch up from day one. So I think that's an important piece to describe in the model, and I know there have been questions about it. In terms of what the daily bell schedule will look like, I know this was in, it was linked in our larger document that's on the website, and this was also presented on Monday night in the slideshow that all building principals and other administrators put together. But I wanted to revisit this because I know there have been some questions. Students who are in person will have those first 3 blocks of the day as well as directed study block in person. Students will then be dismissed at 12:43, and I know there was some question about that. They'll be dismissed at 12:43. The large majority of our students will be leaving the building and transitioning home. For those students who rely on the school for their lunch, and then our last block of the day will be that remote learning block. The remote learning block is, again, an opportunity for all students to be together. So all of those pieces that I described that are so important in those first few days, students will still have the benefit of those in that last block class that is going to be happening each day. In addition to that, because we run a rotating schedule, those students will be having a different block for that remote learning block at the end of the day. So it's not going to affect the same class every day. And I think that's an important piece to note as well. So what does the daily schedule look like in the in-person cohort? First block, they're in person. Second block, they're in person. They are then going to have a directed study block, again, in person. Many of our students receive special education services during this time. We also have a number of students that do band and chorus during this time. And then we have other students who are able to obtain extra help from teachers in the classroom because they're in that classroom with their teacher. And again, that rotates through. Third block is in person. They then transition home. And that fourth block is the remote or synchronous block with all members of the class. Similarly, for the remote cohort, the first block is remote to the live class. Second block, again, remote, same bell schedule as the students who are in school. Directed study block. Third block, remote, again, same bell schedule as the students who are in the building. Transition time, and then that fourth block, they're reunited with all of their peers in that similar remote learning environment. And then I did want to talk a little bit about remote learning, because remote learning is something that there were a number of questions about in terms of what is this going to look like. And I really thought a lot about how I can best describe remote learning in the context of this presentation and to try to help people understand what it's going to feel like or what it's going to be like with remote learning. And really, I want to shift that a little bit, because to just talk about remote learning really implies that remote learning is done in a vacuum or that it's something very different than in person. And so I want to shift that thinking a little bit to talking about instructional practices. Because in a typical class, and normally our blocks are 77 minutes, in a typical class, our teachers are incredibly adept at using a variety of instructional practices to meet the needs of the students that are in front of them. These are carefully designed instructional practices that are dependent on curriculum needs, the needs of the students, the subject area, and a variety of other sort of tried and true methods that teachers are well versed in. In addition to that, in a typical block, a lot of those instructional practices really could be thought of as in sort of 4 different categories. So there's the content that's delivered, so the content or skills. Students then discuss those new skills or discuss that new content. They ask questions about it. They may be discussing that with their teacher. They may be discussing that with other peers in class. They also have an opportunity oftentimes to practice these new skills or to delve deeper into the content that is delivered. That may play out in a lab. So students learn about various chemistry properties, and then they're able to conduct that chemistry lab to understand really what it means for the different chemicals to be mixing together, and how do they actually apply the knowledge that they've gained. It might be that students are learning coding in a computer science class, and now they have an opportunity to actually write that code and try it out and see how that works. Or maybe they're practicing their language development in their world language classes, or they're working on an essay for an English class. But there are tons of opportunities that are naturally incorporated into our blocks and into our instructional practices that allow for students that independent time to practice their skills and to dive deeper into their interests. And then a huge component of these instructional practices is the feedback that comes from their teachers, the feedback that comes from their peers, and then they're taking that feedback and they're adjusting their own practices, or they're asking different questions based on that feedback. That applies whether they're in person or whether they're in remote learning, whether they're either independent or whether they're live Zooming into the class. All of those instructional practices are incredibly vital as students are starting to understand new learning experiences and delving into areas that are unfamiliar to them. In person, in class, there's usually typical movement around the classroom. And oftentimes these different components here are blended seamlessly and they go back and forth, and there's a good amount of time in class to utilize all of these different instructional practices. With remote learning, teachers have to be that much more skilled at really carefully teasing out and determining which of these components are best in the live environment and which of these components are better in asynchronous pieces. Because that live time, whether it's in person or Zooming, that's precious time with our students. Opportunities for students to ask questions, for them to practice and then come back and get feedback. And so how these play out, they're teased out a little bit more, and there might be different methods or different weight given to the amount of practice that students are working through, or to the amount of discussion that takes place. And so all of those pieces come into the remote learning environment, but that is happening in person and it's happening in the remote learning. And as I said, 77-minute blocks, it's very rare that our teachers are utilizing only one instructional practice during that time. It is natural, even in person and in a typical setting, for students to have independent time and come back together. It's very rare that it's the teacher who's leading that discussion for the entire block. This is designed so that we can maximize the value of the teachers, their skills, their knowledge, and also to help foster that student-teacher relationship. Students are going to have questions. They're going to want to Zoom in and talk to their teachers. And we want to make sure that we're providing the best opportunity for them to do that. This summer, Tom Reeve, who I mentioned the other night, who's our technology integration specialist at the high school, who is quite skilled himself with remote learning as well as instructional practices. He has been teaching a course this summer, and he has approximately 20 high school teachers that are part of this. And what I'm describing here in terms of these instructional practices and how to best utilize the remote learning environment, how to best utilize the in-person environment, that's really the curriculum of the course that he's teaching. And so I have no doubt that our teachers coming in who have participated in that course are going to be really excited to demonstrate their skills and to also look at how they can support students no matter what environment they're in. And I also know that a lot of the content that he has been working with the teachers on this summer will also be part of our professional development for those days at the start of the school year. And then my last slide is to just answer a few questions that have come up. We are doing everything we can to maintain the program of studies and maintain our course offerings, which is really important to us. We are not eliminating classes to the best of our ability. And at this point, we have not had to eliminate any classes. A lot of questions about grading. Courses are graded and they do factor into GPA. Outdoor spaces has come up quite a bit. We are doing everything we can to make sure to support students and teacher learning outside, around the perimeter of our school, in our courtyards. This typically happens anyway. If you drive by the high school, there are a number of classes that are outdoors. I know Mr. Boudet was speaking about this last night. In addition, there have been questions about clubs and activities. We had a lot of success in the spring with clubs and activities running remotely. I anticipate that that will be the same for this fall. Again, some of these pieces, of course, still need to be worked out. Athletics, you heard Dr. Kuska speak to athletics last night. We are still waiting guidance from the MIAA. If athletics do happen, they will happen after the school year begins. And then again, as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, the same cleaning and health and safety protocols apply to the high school as they do to the entire district. So I am going to stop sharing there so that I can see everybody's faces. And I'm glad to see when I just stopped sharing my screen that everybody was still there and I wasn't talking to myself. So I was was a little worried there for a second. So I wanted to go through those slides. Just again, I think those were some large topics that I've received questions on. I know members of school committee have received questions on, and I also think some members of school committee have some of those questions. So I am happy to delve into any of those aspects of the presentation that I just discussed, or I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have about the high school model.
Thank you, Nicole. Can I just say one thing, as I think it relates to what the questions are? One of the questions that has come up today as well, and I think it relates to people about remote model and in-person and blending it all together. There have been a lot of questions about live streaming into a classroom setting. And I think there's a semantics with that. We are not proposing live streaming into a classroom in the way that would mean taping or having anyone in the classroom that way. However, it is possible to have a student attend a class virtually. And that's not a live streaming situation. That's been happening already. That's the same as a student that was zooming in to the teacher remotely. They're virtually having class with the teacher. So I just wanted to clarify that because there certainly are ramifications to live streaming that we were not proposing. And I think it sometimes seems the same, but it really is not. I had a situation where I had a student who, for physical reasons, could not attend school ever for health reasons, and had a robotic, some type of robot that would travel around the building from class to class. So the child could attend the class virtually through the robot, but there was no live streaming of what was going on in the classroom beyond that. It's virtual. I hope that helps.
Thank you, because there's been a lot of conversation about that, so thank you for that. Dawn?
Nicole, the part where I think the schedule flashed up, block 4, was that 60 minutes and not 71 minutes? Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, and we have a 35-minute DSB, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and in that DSB period, we would have about 460 students. Would they be, as they're used to, wandering the school, having 35 minutes to congregate in areas, or would they be staying within the classroom that they attended block 2?
They would be remaining in the classroom that they attended block 2. We would have some students who are leaving their second block class to transition to a designated secondary location for a class that they are taking during DSB. Band and chorus leave their classrooms and travel to a designated location for band and chorus. We have a number of students who receive special education services during directed study block. Those students then go to, again, the classrooms where they receive the learning support classes. And then we have a few other, sort of smaller groups like that. But the large majority of students will be remaining in their second block class. And as I said, for any students who are traveling during that transition to a secondary DSB location, it is a designated location for a class. It is not in the way that we currently run the model.
Okay, and that 35 minutes that would be designated time for chorus or band, those are things that we would have to have outside 10 feet apart, or we don't have them. Is that correct? Based on the current guidelines or recommendations?
Based on the current guidelines, that is correct.
Is there also chorus and band after school? Is there an after school component of that outside?
So chorus and band have a couple of different groups that run. Typically Monday evenings is jazz band, and Tuesday and Thursday are different components of chorus. That is still in conversation. Those are incredibly important to a number of students, and I would like to figure out how to creatively support students. That being said, there are pieces of that may need to be remote in a similar fashion to our clubs and activities. I was unbelievably impressed, as I know a number of you were, because I was receiving messages from you in the spring as to what our band and chorus teachers were able to accomplish in those remote settings. Our fine and performing arts were still putting together unbelievable performances and really I was pretty blown away by the work that the students were doing. So I have no doubt that they can replicate that in the fall, given even more time to think about it. I've been in communication, as I had said yesterday, with a couple of different people in terms of music and in terms of theater as well. And so those conversations have started. We didn't receive those guidelines until just about a week ago or so, maybe a week and a half ago. So those conversations started later than the others because we were waiting on those guidelines for the state.
Okay, my question is more about DSB. And for the majority of students that will end block 2 after 71 minutes sitting in their seat in a mask, they then have another 35 minutes plus the whatever transition time you have in between block 2 and DSB, where they're sitting in that classroom, mask on, probably close to 100 minutes. Is there any thought to either shortening DSB to 25 minutes and giving that instructional time back to block 4, or having DSB after the 3 blocks such that you could stagger the release where kids that don't have to stay for DSB, they leave? Have we thought about that? And if not, why not?
Sure. So there were probably 10 or 12 different iterations of the schedule we were playing around with based on timing, based on the impact on the rest of the district as well. I think I said yesterday that one of the pieces that I've really valued so much prior to this, but certainly throughout this process, is how collaborative the administrators have been across all the different buildings, and how much we have really taken the approach that every single student in Holliston are our students, regardless of whether they're in our grade levels or not. And so looking at dismissal times and looking at what was possible, we really did take into account what impact it would have on transportation, what impact it would have on the other buildings. And so that factored into some of the models that were early on maybe favorable and then didn't work out because of that reason. In a typical school year, our directed study block is 41 minutes. So we've actually already cut down that directed study block to 35 minutes. Cutting that down to 35 minutes already does have a direct impact on our band and chorus and the length of time those classes exist. And again, I just want to reiterate that we have a number of students who receive their special education services during the directed study block. And that time is really important for them as well for their progress on skill development and the goals that they're working on. That time also is really valuable for students to be able to get extra help from their teachers, especially when we're looking at a hybrid environment where they're not going to be in person 5 days a week. And so that time is really valuable with being able to ask the individual questions they have. And so thinking about maintaining the integrity of that block and the length of that block, as I said, we already sort of shortened it a little bit so that we could maintain the length of our other 4 blocks, in particular the 3 that are in person. We did talk a little bit about moving directed study block. One of the advantages of having directed study block after second period is that the students who are in person get a break. And so there is an opportunity for them to take a mask break outdoors if they need to. There's an opportunity for the teacher to take their class outdoors if they're not already outdoors. And many of our teachers are actually looking forward to teaching more of their classes outdoors, weather permitting. And then thinking about the students who are home and remote learning, it's a really important opportunity for them to have a break from the screens as well. So they'll have just spent 2 blocks in remote learning, and then to have an opportunity to have that screen break for DSB, or at least to have that block look different for them, because they might be zooming in to meet one-on-one with a teacher, or they might be doing some independent work. And again, it's an opportunity for them to get up, stand up away from the screen, stretch their legs, and have that important wellness break. So those were some of the decisions that went into what that schedule looks like so that we could maximize the time that students would have in school, but also maximize how they were using that time.
And Louise, you had some questions, your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for going through I'm sneaking this off. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit in the public space here. Thank you for going through this in more detail, Nicole. It's been very helpful. Dawn asked many of the questions that I had, so I appreciate that. I just wanted to understand better the thoughts and timing around lunch and when the kids will eat. Again, I apologize because I've been away, but my understanding is it won't be in school, but it's kind of a long day, so I want to make sure I understand that clearly. And then just one side note, I think it's essential to have that DSB period right where you have it because of the break. I think it's whether you're in school or at home, I think it's a very long day for students to go back to back, one class to the next without that time. And I agree, at home it's a challenge. And maybe that's the chance they get to have a snack if they go outside or something. But how does the lunch work?
In terms of the time, so there were a couple questions that I heard in there. So no, it's fine. If I missed something, please let me know. In terms of the timing of lunch, with our new school start and end times for next year, the 12:46 actually coincides with the end of second lunch for next year. So there would be a number of students who, if we were in a normal bell schedule in a normal year and COVID was not a factor, there are students who would be eating during that second lunch during that time. And then there would be students whose third lunch, who would be attending third lunch, and that third lunch wouldn't start until close to 1 o'clock next year. So in terms of the timing of lunch, that 12:46 dismissal is actually sort of right in the middle of our 3 lunches. So it's not a drastic difference by any means in terms of what our regular bell schedule would be based on shifting the high school times 40 minutes later. In terms of what that lunch looks like, Susan Pilevsky, if you have not had a chance to work with her, she is Director of Food Services for Holliston and is wonderful. She is incredibly great to work with, really flexible, cares deeply about students, and really tries to make things work in the best interest of kids. So I have not personally had a conversation with her about this, but I know Mr. Boudet has been in communication with her and has been working on plans for what this is going to look like. She also stepped up tremendously for the district in the spring and throughout the summer in terms of providing meals for families who needed to come and pick up those meals at the school. So I have no doubt that this is going to be handled very well from a food services perspective. Students will have the opportunity for a grab and go lunch. So it will not be a buffet lunch in terms of going in and, standing in line and sitting with your tray in the cafeteria. It will be more of a sort of a pre-prepared lunch for the students, and it will be that grab and go option. The large majority of students will be leaving at 12:46 and will be transitioning home. Some of those students may choose to then get that grab and go lunch on their way out the door. And then when they get home, they sit down in the comfort of their kitchen without their masks on and they eat that lunch. We do know that we'll have some students, and I don't know what the percentage will be yet, but some students who will remain at the building because their only means of transportation is the bus, and that won't be running until later in the day. For those students, again, grab and go lunch option, and we will be providing some designated areas where we can accommodate those students for lunch. We frankly do not have the space or the personnel to accommodate our entire school during lunches. We just don't, and especially not at the physical distancing and without masks and proper precautions. We don't. We will be able to accommodate a smaller percentage of students who need to remain at school, as I said, because the bus is their only means of transportation.
Thank you.
Nicole, can you talk to the fourth block? It's 60 minutes. Is that a decrease in time on learning, where it's only 60 minutes and the other 3 blocks are 77?
So the other 3 blocks are 71 minutes to allow for additional transition in between the blocks so that students can navigate their way around the school. They're used to having 4 minutes, and we need to increase that because we're going to have one-way hallways and one-way stairwells. And it's just, that in addition to hand washing at hand washing stations and hand sanitizer and cleaning, their environment. So we needed that additional time. The last block is 60 minutes. It's 60 minutes initially because we also want to be really respectful of our school start and end times for next year, which are 8 8:10 to 2:43. And so keeping that in mind, that end of the day contractually, we want to be mindful of what school committee has set for our end of day. And so because of that and working with the times and the parameters we have, that results in a 60-minute block at the end of the day instead of that 71-minute block. And again, that's to keep within the 8:10 to 2:43. There are some benefits to the last block of the day being a little bit shorter. Again, I think Anne-Louise Hanstead just spoke to, what that Zoom environment is like, and when you're on the screen and when you're on the computer and you need that break. I think by the end of the day, a 60-minute class is probably more appropriate than a 71-minute class. Again, part of that decision was based on the start and end times, but a benefit of that is a little bit of a shorter block. Students and teachers are pretty fatigued by the end of the day. I mean, I know you all have experienced being in these meetings, and when they're lengthy, it's challenging sitting in a Zoom session for a long period of time. And so really giving that opportunity for students to get a break by the end of the day. So
I feel like that's sending a mixed message, though, about, I know being on Zoom is tiring.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. We've been Zooming together for 4 days now. I am not sold on a 60-minute block and kids not being in school for all 4 blocks. And I don't have a high schooler, so this isn't even a personal issue. I just think in general, the kids I'm just not sold on it. I guess I'm trying to understand. What?
You're not coming through. I'm sorry, it was chopping up. What are you not sold on? What are you concerned about?
I'm concerned that students are not in the school for their full school day, like all the other grades. And I'm concerned that we're cutting that last class by a fairly significant amount of time. I'm not an educator, but that concerns me because I feel like they're missing out on learning time.
So are you suggesting that the block should be longer, or that it should be in school, in person?
Both.
How can it be longer if we logistically have to add time for them to move throughout the building? Because moving throughout that building under ordinary circumstances is like, it almost requires pedestrian cops. It's so hard because the hallways are so busy. And now they're going to have to make them all one-way directions.
Then maybe it's not. Then maybe the students don't move and maybe it's the teachers. I don't know. I'm just trying to focus on, I think they should be in school for the 4 blocks, and I want to make sure we're not taking away time on learning. Dawn?
I'm also intensely concerned about the reduction of time for the 4th block. And I know it sounds trite, 71 minutes to 60 minutes, but over the period of 170 days, that's 31 hours of learning. We know that we are required to provide, I think it's something like 5.5 hours. So I assume the response is that it's some kind of synchronous learning. But I do wonder, 3 71-minute blocks with 10-minute breaks in between, still really, it's 3.5 hours for their instruction. If we were to then put DSB 4th, it would give some students the ability to get home. How much time are we building in for lunch or getting home before the 4th block? Is that part of the reduction in instructional hours? Is that instead of students having 25 or 30 minutes for lunch, we've built in 60 minutes in the day? Is that, I apologize, but I'm trying to follow the schedule. I hear all of your concerns, and I think that this has been a lot of thinking going into trying to make transportation work, make mass breaks work. There's so many components, so I know you understand that. But I think within that, the commissioner did also say to us in a couple of different platforms that
we know that we're going to need additional time for passing and things like that. And he was very understanding and cognizant of that, things like mask breaks. So while it does seem like there's a net loss, I think that's something that is maybe not as explicitly in there, but in an elementary setting, it's not booked in there in the schedule, so you don't see it. But there's a similar issues with all children in all levels. And I think very likely it'd be very more similar than dissimilar at all buildings based on the changing needs of this model in any shape or form.
So why is it remote? Why is that last period remote?
We can't accommodate students at 6 feet without masks to eat lunch. So I need to be able to dismiss so that those students can go home and eat lunch. That last remote learning block also has the same benefits that I described as those first few days in terms of all students being together in that learning environment. It really does it does increase that sense of community when all students are together in that same environment. But really a huge driving factor is the fact that we just cannot safely accommodate our students eating lunch. And so then we need to look at what is a reasonable time then for them to be spending the day there prior to lunch. You know, we could extend the day to 1:30, but that's students not eating until well past that. You know, that to me doesn't seem reasonable in terms of students' needs and being able to have lunch at a reasonable time. So, you know, that 12:43 time period is so that students can get home so that they can eat lunch. They, you know, transition home, eat lunch, have a mask break, prepare for their next class. You know, our students are spending time outside of the school building in really meaningful learning experiences as well. So I know I'm an educator and the principal of a school, and it's about having students in the building, but I don't want to shortchange the learning experiences that students have independently and the learning experiences that they have when they come in and they talk to their teacher about creating an app on their own at night, or they talk to their students about learning how to play a song on the guitar that they've been working on so much. Some of those learning experiences don't need to happen in the building. Some of those learning experiences are extensions of the content and the skills that they're developing in the building. So I know it feels like with that remote learning block, it feels like they are not getting that full last block. What I would say is that the 77-minute blocks, as I spoke to the different instructional practices, built into those 77-minute blocks are time for students to do independent work. And so now if it's a 60-minute block and they're not doing as much of that independent work in the block, they may be doing more of that built in for other activities and other learning experiences. But, you know, I do really want to be mindful of our health and safety guidelines, and I want to make sure that we're supporting students in the safest way possible to come back in the building, and lunch is just not feasible in the high school building.
Yeah, Nicole, you bring up some really good points. I'm sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to jump in on you. I'll be very quick. I know even my own daughter, who was a first-year teacher this year, thrust into remote learning. I remember her saying to me, Mom, even though this was a very difficult experience, the connections I made with some of my students one-to-one in some of these remote platforms, because she was checking in with them in different times, they were very meaningful. So I do see the value of that. And I guess, Lisa, I definitely give you a chance for your question. I just wanted to mention, if the school committee or individuals or as a whole had a suggestion that they want us to consider, I think certainly we can try to adjust if there's a better option. But I know that there was a lot of time taken in to see if there was any other crunching of minutes to get our today. So Nicole, I do thank you for your wonderful presentation. And Lisa, please ask your question. I apologize.
Lisa, I can't.
I have to unmute myself. Yes, I know. Okay. Thank you, Nicole. I think that this is a lot more clear than it has been the last couple. We've met so many nights. But I think
again.
this has answered some of my questions. I do want to ask, though, I do still have a couple of questions. Why are we not thinking about having the high school kids eat lunch at their desks in the classroom like some of the other schools are doing?
So we currently run 3 lunches in the building. in order to run those 3 lunches, teachers, that's when they eat lunch. So when their students are at lunch, that's when they're eating lunch. So for example, typically our English and social studies department take first lunch. So when they send their students to the cafeteria to eat, that's when they have an opportunity to eat their lunch as well. We don't have duties in Holliston, so we don't have cafeteria monitors. We don't have, teachers don't have CAF duty. So it's generally the administrators that are in the cafeteria for an hour and a half every day monitoring that, because we don't have, teachers don't have duties to do that. When the students are out and we're supervising the students, the teachers are eating lunch. I don't have personnel that can then supervise those students in the classroom while they're eating lunch while teachers are taking their own lunch.
Okay, that makes sense. On DSB, I think that I understand more. My concern with DSB was I don't want to have kids in the building any longer than we need them to be in the building. So my thought was, if the majority of kids doing DSB are basically using it, they're using it to kind of do their homework, right? If they're not getting help from a teacher and they're not in band or chorus, they're basically using it to either socialize or get some of their work done, correct?
There's a variety of reasons, but yes, to do homework, to get started on a project, to ask individual questions of the teacher, to meet with groups of students to work on a project, to do pit crew, there's a variety of reasons why they're in there. And then built into this in terms of our COVID-19 environment is also that ability to, if they're remote, have that break from the screen. If they're in the building, have that mask break as well.
Okay.
But Nicole, so they're in with their second period of class, so they have access to that second period teacher unless they're going to chorus or band for another 35 minutes. So I think we're talking about, wanting more time on learning. That's an opportunity, and it rotates. So, each day they have access to another teacher for 35 minutes to either work independently and get feedback, work with their peers with the support of their teacher. So that's, a critical time to get more, access to that classroom and that classroom teacher.
Yes, they won't be doing live clubs during that period. Is that correct?
No, and they don't do live clubs now during DSB. Those are all after school. To follow up, Peter, with your point, in terms of, if you think about on an A day, B block would be second block. So they have their class and then they would have that additional 35 minutes with their B block teacher. On a C day, B block would be the last block of the day. And so it'll be a little shorter on that C block day, but they'll have more access to their teacher on their A block. And so, if you start looking at those numbers as well.
Okay. I don't know how your head has not exploded doing all of this, but I do understand it a lot better now. And I thank you for that. My only other comment is that on the starting date, I'm glad to hear that I do better appreciate now the concept of having all kids start remotely, so a teacher isn't trying to start with a new class while teaching in 2 completely different styles. That makes a lot more sense to me now. But I do, and it sounds like this is the direction you're going in anyway, but I do want to balance that. I think that period of time should be as short as it can be, because I am really concerned, and I know Dawn has mentioned this, that by the end of September, we might be 100% remote anyway. So, due to the, numbers going up, having cases in Holliston, whatever it may be. So I do really want to just advocate for that to be just maybe a couple of days as opposed to a whole week, because I am very worried that we won't get the high school kids much face time before we have to shut the whole thing down. So I just wanted to throw that in there, but thank you for all of this. This has helped me a ton tonight. I understand it so much better now than I did the last couple times we talked about this.
Well, and I appreciate the opportunity to go in more depth. It's been long presentations the last few nights. And so I think when when I present last, there is that tendency to want to be mindful of how much time we've all been talking at all of you and at the community. So I really do appreciate the opportunity to sort of slow it down tonight and dive a little bit deeper into that. And I do appreciate the focus on the balance. You know, the balance is really important. And I hear you, Lisa, when you say that we don't know what the end of September or beginning of October is going to look like. You know, I think those few days in the beginning are really going to be meaningful and beneficial to establishing such better relationships that when we do eventually, if we do, right, I can't predict the future, but if we eventually then need to switch back to remote learning, those foundations that are built are so much stronger than if from the beginning teachers felt like it was chaotic and they were playing catch up and, you know, all of those challenges that were coming into it. But I hear you on the balance for sure.
And one more thing, just for the people watching at home, you have to remember that you're dealing with a school committee that is much more familiar as a group with Placentino or Miller. I haven't yet had a high schooler. So, and there are a couple of us on the school committee that haven't yet had a high schooler. So it is a little bit more of a challenge getting our heads around it, as opposed to the job that, you know, some of the other principals have to do. They have the benefit of familiarity.
Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Kuska.
Oh, I just noticed Anne Louise has had her hand up. I was trying to be cognizant. I didn't know if you were.
Sorry, was muted. I'll make it short. I'll thank you for saying it was 4 days up front, maybe at most. I was concerned because in the last two presentations, it did feel like 2 weeks. And I shared Dawn's concern, and the one Lisa reiterated. I would echo the advocacy for as short as possible. What I think I was hearing, Nicole, is that those upfront days, I would liken it to what I've been going through here in Indiana. It's sort of orientation. It's orientation for the students and orientation for the teachers to regroup with students about how the year is going to proceed. And unlike the elementary level, for instance, they're dealing with 30, upwards of 90 students that they're orienting, as opposed to an elementary class where, you know, it's much easier to do more quickly right on the first day of school. So it can take several days, I think, for both students and staff to get centered. And that doesn't even account for the fact that students still have an add drop period. And I don't know if that will exist. I'm assuming it will. But if a student decides to change their classes or add or start, that all happens in those first couple of weeks, and that could change their schedule. So, so there's I think there's a lot of fluidity to the high school schedule that goes well beyond what you see in the elementary and middle school level. And that orientation period is important. So thank you.
Cynthia, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to say, so you're describing what it's going to look like if we're doing the hybrid model. So how will remote learning change from this model if we do have to do a whole remote program? Because it's not going to then be 5.5 hours a day of remote staring at a screen. Is that correct? Or are we not even discussing that right now?
Right. I mean, we're trying to figure out what the start of the school year looks like, right? So one of the things that I really appreciate, I think, about all 4 buildings is that we had a real focus and you know, Dr. Patella really led us through this as well in some of the conversations we were having around curriculum development, but we really had a focus on a continuum with seamless transition between a hybrid model at 6 feet, if we eventually go to 3 feet, if we come back up to 6 feet, if we go to remote, because what we didn't want for teachers, for students, for community, for, you know, parents and guardians, we didn't want it to feel like this drastic shift, because it's hard enough already, right? Making those changes. We didn't want it to feel like all of a sudden now their classes were different, their schedules different. I mean, that it was going to be drastically different. So the idea is that it's really designed to be seamless. The way we have placed classes in the building allows for that sort of physical change if we were to go to 3 feet or stay at 6 feet and so forth. If we then switch to remote learning, we would be following the same bell schedule. Now, I do agree we would need to be having some conversations, and I go back to good teaching is good teaching, right? We have really good teachers in Holliston, really good teachers. And those instructional practices that I was describing around, content and discussion and practice and feedback, those are really foundational good teaching practices, whether you're in person or remote. Now, it may be that a science lab is going to look a little different in a remote learning environment than it would be if you have the opportunity to do it in person in the classroom. And our science teachers experienced that in the spring and went above and beyond with science kits and materials and really, really did a nice job. They will need to think a little bit about what weight they give to some of those different instructional practices in terms of how much is content delivery versus how much is independent work. How do they do the breakout sessions maybe a little bit more? How do they build in more opportunities for students to collaborate together? Because when you do switch to that remote learning environment that's all day, that's a long day in terms of screen time, right? So we really do want to be mindful of that. But the essence of the bell schedule, so the stop and start times and all of those pieces, those would remain. Just what happens within those may shift a little, as they should, as our environment shifts, right? In the same way that if we were to shift to 3 feet, and again, I know we are not, please don't misunderstand, we're not saying that we're at 6 feet, but if it were to shift to 3 feet, and now you have the whole class in, you're going to shift your instructional practices again now that everybody's in person and you don't have that sort of remote environment. So, I think there's been a lot of thought that's gone into the structure of the schedule so that they can have that seamless transition. And then this is where I learn new things from our teachers on a daily basis. I learn new things from our students on a daily basis. They have tremendous feedback about what works well in the classroom. And I welcome these conversations. I was chatting with a few teachers this morning and they had a lot of questions, but they also had great ideas. And, this is where this collaborative approach that I think we really value in Holliston comes in. And this is where we really rely on the expertise of our teachers and the feedback from our students too, and our families and what's working, what's not. All of those pieces will play into the adjustments we make as we go along.
Can I make a point too that I think, Nicole, we forgot to remind the school committee and people who are listening, many districts had put together a proposal for Monday, Tuesday, cohort A, Thursday, Friday, cohort B would be in person, and Wednesday for everyone would be remote always. I did say to the team, and we really worked hard. I said, is there a way that we can not have to do that remote for all so that we get a better split and more in person on the Wednesdays, which is the alternating piece? And I said, Keith, please tell me if there's a way we can still get sanitizing in effectively by not, because that's a lot that was driving, health and safety was driving some of that. And this team agreed we're going to do everything in our power not to do that remote additional day, all day for all kids on Wednesdays. And this is why we get a much better, in my opinion, we're getting much more in-person learning than in many other districts are able to provide right now.
Thank you. I also just wanted to say that you guys have done so much work to make this happen, to make this proposal happen. I think a lot of people have been really impressed with the detail of it. I know there's so much we have to work out and discuss with our teachers about how we flesh this all out. But I think we really need to be mindful that we as a community have to do all that we can to make sure this happens. So we have to be very mindful of our own actions in our own families, outside of school, in the environment, in the community, because the more that we are protecting each other, that means the more likelihood we're going to be able to stay in school for as long as we can, keeping everybody safe. So I just wanted to reiterate that everyone needs to be really mindful. We are in this together, which means we all have to be really mindful so that we can actually have school happen in this way. Thanks. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Dawn.
Okay, I've got a few follow-up questions on the phased-in approach. And I also just want to make sure the community understands that on page 20 of the draft plan, there is a phased-in approach for a number of grades, meaning that the first day of school, if it was to be Tuesday, September 15th, only brings back live grades 2, 5, and 8. this second day of school, if it is to be Wednesday, September 16th, brings back first and third. Am I correct here, guys?
If you read it carefully, we are proposing a phased-in approach, and the scenario described there is a possibility of what that might look like in order to phase groups in slowly based upon some things we've learned from the international community around how to safely bring kids back.
Okay, so possible, not final, but it does have implications for the other schools. Is that correct? Phasing in to some level at the other schools?
Yes, it could.
If we felt that we could safely bring everyone back at once, we would consider that. But we're proposing that something more slow would be worthwhile, and it does affect other schools.
And I think phased in might not be the best semantic language. Again, I think this is where we get stuck in language. I kind of think of that as staggered start times, which we have done in normal years. We've staggered the opening day for kindergarten to give them time to do orientation with their teachers and things like that. So in my opinion, this could be more of a staggered start time to allow for some of the safe entry and for us to adjust. If we did, for example, say we're going to start getting our K1 kids back first, and then another day do the next 2 grades, because that allows for us to kind of have more hands on deck and more adults in the building with a smaller cohort as we enter back. So we haven't said exactly what that might look like or if we are doing that. I think that Peter did want to leave an option and the other schools an option to have that staggered start time, if you will. Phased in sounds like a much longer time period, and we're really not talking about that. So I don't know if that helps at all.
Okay, your staggered start time is completed for all other grades, pre-K through 8th, by the end of the first week. I am concerned, but it sounds like we might be moving to some type of compromise position if we can limit the staggering in of the high school instead of 2 weeks, possibly 2 days, 3 days. Is there any consideration to our 9th graders lost the benefit of some of those orientation days at the high school? And I understand that there are some classes that they would be mixed in with 10th graders or potentially even older kids for an elective. But wouldn't there be some value in that first week of bringing back those 9th graders that missed out on that orientation? They're coming into a new school in an absolutely tough situation. Could we not find 2 days during that first week to bring cohort A and cohort B of 9th graders back in to acclimate them to the school before, if we're going to have staggered starts at the high school?
So thank you for bringing that up. That was one piece around 9th grade orientation that I didn't mention in the presentation, and I have received some questions about that, because typically this is the time when we'd be sending out postcards about orientation and students would be getting excited about that. I feel very fortunate in terms of the timing of when we ended up going into crisis teaching in March, that first week in March, we actually were able to get all of the 8th graders who were, at Adams at the time, we were able to get all of the 8th graders up for their half-day experiences at the high school. So all of the 8th graders who were enrolled in the middle school in the beginning of March, and I say that because I know there's some students who transfer into the district, but all of the 8th graders did come up over those 3 days. They had an opportunity to meet with student advisory leaders. They had an opportunity to shadow a class. They also had an opportunity to have tours around the building, and they had an opportunity to ask questions about clubs and activities. They met our school counselors who came in and spoke with them. They had a presentation about the program of studies and how the courses work at the high school. So I feel incredibly fortunate. I mean, we were just off by about a week, and I feel really fortunate that, David worked really hard with the high school to make sure that we could get those 8th graders up here. And that was a real collaborative effort for the administrative team too at the middle school. So those 8th graders have had that experience, which is great. Typically now we would, the week before school starts, have them come in, and the difference would be that they'd be coming in with their actual schedules. So they would be finding the location of their first class. Realistically, I think we're going to be making some tweaks to where those classes are really kind of up until we start the school year, as numbers shift a little bit and as we have further guidance. We have discussed as an administrative team creating a virtual orientation. And I know those conversations are happening at the other buildings. I can't speak for where they're at in the process, but in terms of the high school, we have been speaking with our 2 student advisory leaders, the adults who lead the program, and we have our student advisory leaders who had already been chosen for next year. We have about 50 juniors. And so we're talking about having them help support the creation of some virtual tours for students, and doing a lot of it through video and a lot of it through probably realistically administrators in the building, and showing off some of the different locations. So I think we'll be able to do a lot of that. One of the pieces that and we've learned through this process, because I'm always looking for what are the positives that are coming out of this, right? How do we make improvements? One of the positives that's come out is this opportunity to start thinking differently about access. And so how can we make sure that in the future, even if we are in the building, how much of this can we have a recording of what this experience might look like? Because we have students who transfer into our school building at times other than the first day of the school year, and being able to say to them, hey, here's this virtual tour. As you're starting to think about preparing for coming into our building next week, take a look at this. This is a guide. So I think that there are pieces that are going to be built in that are going to complement the experience that the 8th graders had in March. But I agree, it's not the same as what we would typically have. And so I think those are pieces we're giving thought to. I know that all of the administrators, and Peter's been having conversations with us as well about making sure that we think about those first 2 weeks with teachers, or the time that teachers are going to be doing professional development, and how can we provide some opportunities during that might be led by administrators or other professionals who are not necessarily in a professional development workshop. But how can we provide other opportunities for families to ask questions? How can we provide opportunities for students to be able to do some of those trainings and other pieces too? So, all of that is a work in progress. I think most of our efforts have really gone to trying to create this plan. And I think Dr. Kuska has had us all, working really hard on trying to get what we need to be able to present something to the community. And so there's so many more of those pieces that will come into play once we have a sense of what our model is moving forward.
So I think what I'm hearing from a few people or a couple of people is that you really are concerned, obviously, about that first week and what it looks like. And if you would like us to consider it an edit to the plan that would allow us to tighten up that window and some assurance that it would not go beyond the first week is what I think I'm hearing. And I could certainly talk with Dr. Botello and Nicole tomorrow and see if we could put some language in there to reflect that a little bit better. Would that be helpful?
I think that would be helpful.
Yes.
Yes, please.
I agree. I think it's funny. I think the relationship building you're talking about is critical, that it happens at once, and the remote will support that. But I think the sooner they get to a physical environment, the sooner they connect in a different way with what high school will be about and with what this year will be about. I do think that was a very interesting and valid point about creating the virtual orientation tours, if you will. And if higher education serves as a model, every single university in the country has had to advance to that level. And the experiences they've created have been pretty amazing. And I think it actually does a pretty good job of reducing anxiety before a student starts a new experience. So I think that's something we should be doing anyway, if we can make it happen. I'm sorry, I was eating my dinner, and I just want you to know there's nobody within about 50 feet of me. I think that would be very helpful, Dr. Kuska, if you could look at trying to shorten that upfront period.
Sure, and I can share an update once we talk about what we would write in there to edit that.
I guess I just had one last question. I guess I'm trying to understand, we already know how many students are going to be staying on campus after that third block because of transportation.
Do we already know? Is that what you asked?
Yes.
No, we don't know yet, because it will depend upon which children parents for lunch reasons or otherwise would ask that they do have that opportunity. It also would depend on some of our special needs cohorts that we will be offering some more in person as well. So we don't have that number until we get a fine indication from parents of what the remote learning piece would look like, and then also determine which parents would be dismissing their parents. So we don't have that information yet. We're not ready to send out that specific detail yet.
But what is the capacity though? Or what is the, at what point do we say we have too many kids staying to wait for the bus? I guess I'm just going back to, I am stuck on them going home for that last block. I'm sorry. And I'm hearing from high school parents. I'm stuck on it. And so I'm trying to piece it all together. And if lunch is the issue, then how do you manage how many kids are staying after school? We could presume that many of your senior students would have a method of transportation. Many of them, not all. I'm not going to make a general statement. So that leaves you your underclassmen and a good percentage of maybe your juniors. So I guess I'm really trying to, what is our capacity then if we can't, how are we going to manage this?
It really would be that the majority would be expected to be dismissed. So my brain is not working around the best way to get that information back right now, but I'm sure I can come up with
I'm not asking it very well either, but I guess I need the message to be clear that parents are not happy with this plan. And I don't want to offer them to email all of us or all of you. But there is a concern about the kids not staying in school for the full day. And I don't know how else to articulate that. And I'm just concerned about that. I really am.
Stacy, are you suggesting that the students then sit at their desks and eat instead?
Maybe,
and then stay for a fourth block?
Maybe, or we use the field house.
We just talked about how we can't do that because they have to be monitored in some way, shape, or form, right? And we can't require the teachers to sit in the room and eat lunch with the students.
Right. But there's a proposal on the table for health and safety monitors to be hired. So if we can hire them for the elementary grades, why can't we hire them for?
But not one for every classroom.
Could I?
Right?
Yeah, the difference with the elementary model is they're in a much more finite cohort, and we already, because of the we're combining two classes together to separate a full class into two classes, and we already have a team approach in with a paraprofessional, or in some cases a co-teacher. So those cohorts are much more self-contained, which is why they can eat together. The amount of staff that you're talking about could be very, very much increased. And then we have a similar, the same thing could happen at other buildings where we have a similar expectation that the more for safely getting children in the building and minimizing these types of things, there is a hope that we also would have our middle school students be dismissed if they are able to be dismissed and parents are transporting them, because the more students that stay for lunch is challenging. That is challenging at all levels, except in a situation like the elementary where they're very much self-contained in a one room for most of the day for all students.
I get that, but the students are already in the building, right? So it's not like we're adding more students. I'm just saying, and I know you want to smack me right now, but I'm trying to walk through this and talk about this. The students are already in the building. That's my issue. They're already there. Now, what if they were in the field house? I'm not sure that high school students need one adult for every 5 students to watch them while they eat lunch. I don't know what the number is, but I do think, and Louise, I see your hand. Hold on one second. I see your point, but I think we need to talk this through more. I'm not sure we've explored all the options. And it's 9 o'clock at night. I don't have any more options in my head, and I appreciate that. But I think we need a little more work on this one.
So I just shot off a couple of photos to Susan, Keith, and Nicole. I'm sorry I can't text fast enough to get them off to everybody, but you're welcome to pull them up. I just want to know, have we explored, other than the monitor issue, have we explored the outdoor tent solution or the plexiglass separators? And I'm offering this up because as I sit here in Indiana, Notre Dame is probably one of the few, but one of the few universities bringing back 100% of its students to class full time. And I'm not going to lie, I was reluctant. I was surprised to learn that that was going to be the plan, and I was skeptical. But I've been here now for 3 or 4 days, and I am blown away at the precautions that have been put in place and the detailed plans. And I fully appreciate it's a private university that may have an endowment ready to spend money on this kind of stuff, but they've put up at least a dozen massive tents outside that have tables. And I asked what these were for, and they're for classes to go out to, they're for lunches, they're for students to be able to get outside and just spend more time outside. And in addition to that, and let me just say, it gets cold here. Like right now, it's 50 degrees. In addition to that, they've put up the plexiglass separators in the libraries and the eating internal spaces where kids might be in a setting where, at a moment, for whatever reason, they would need to take off their masks. And there's like a million other things, but that is how they are addressing the lunch situation. And there may well come a time in November or sooner when it's too cold for them to eat outside in those tents. But have we looked at setting up some outdoor eating spaces that could be protected from the rain, but would still be feasible even in that setting at some level?
So Keith and I could speak to that a little bit. I just was wondering if it was safe to allow the principals to exit, and then we can answer some of those questions that are more district-wide.
Sure.
Just a real quick question. I just really want to understand, we have 2 blocks, then DSB, then a 3rd block. How much time are we giving the kids before they go home, or where they're going home before they have to get on the 4th block? And can we publish that to the community?
Is it an hour?
Does it say an hour? The time from the end of 3rd block until the start of 4th block, it's 1 hour. That's reflected in the diagram that's linked in the document on the website.
Okay. Could we shorten that 1 hour to 50 minutes and build back in 10 minutes to block 4?
I think we worry about kids getting home safely in a timely manner in order to get them back on, especially if they have to eat and then get back on. That is a worry.
But I also think we're a school system that brings home an entire busload of kids, 80 kids, within 40 minutes. So we know it can be done within 50 minutes. But we also have to balance the culture of our community where juniors and seniors historically leave for lunch and congregate. So if we give them an hour, rest assured they'll use it to congregate for lunch. If we give them 50 minutes, they might be more pressed for time to get home for block 4. But can we please consider that? And that builds back in 31 hours of instruction time.
There isn't a bus available during that time, Dawn. Everybody's going to have to do it themselves.
No, I'm not saying there's a bus, but I'm saying we have run a bus system that gets 80 kids home in 40 minutes. So I am confident that the high school students can get home in 50 minutes.
Wait, how are they doing that, Dawn? Are you thinking
driving themselves?
Isn't that what we're expecting here? Is that the high school kids are getting out of approximately 12:40 something and getting themselves home for block 4? Are we providing bus transport to get them home for block 4? No, we are not.
So I think, clearly these are conversations we can continue to have. And I think that we, you know, I definitely have to look at the making sure the planning time for teachers and the lunch for teachers is all built into that. So I don't think I can give you an answer on that right now. And I think Nicole's tried to think of all of that, but we'll look at it again.
Thank you.
Then can I just ask a clarifying question, just so I understand? I know we don't know the numbers, but you must have some writing assumption on the percent of students that will physically stay on site. Is it 50% of the student body at the high school? Is it 25%? What are you thinking is a potential maximum number of students that might need to stay up at the high school?
So I can give you a quick answer based on the guidance that Keith Boudet has provided me in multiple conversations about the transportation. It is one piece of the puzzle, though, so I just want to caution that when I say this. Between the middle and high school, there are 375 potential seats on the bus. 121 of those need to go to the 6th grade. So that leaves, I don't know what the math is off the top of my head, 250 that are divided across 5 different grades of students. With a hybrid model, you then 6 grades of students. Thank you for the math, Keith. 6 grades of students. That is then cut in half because of the hybrid model. So if you have 250 across 6 different grades of students, so 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's 250 spots for the bus across those. Then if you think about the A model and the A cohort and the B cohort, now you divide that in half again, and we're at 125 per cohort spaced across 6 buildings. So potentially we're talking about, 75 to 100. Those are very rough numbers. Keith is much more detailed on this than I am at this point, but maybe 75 to 100 students who would be remaining. That's a maximum, and we would still need to figure out in terms of bus transportation, as Keith discussed yesterday, what that process would be for determining who's eligible for those seats or not. So there are a lot of other pieces that factor in, and it may end up that based on whatever model is chosen or whatever method is chosen to allocate those seats, it may end up that more of those are for 7th and 8th graders than they are for the high school based on, need. Again, that's not where I necessarily can speak to that. That's where Keith and the district as a whole would need to look at that. But we are talking about a much smaller percentage when you start looking at the number of students that would potentially be there.
Okay, so just my last question. Did you look at using the field house for lunch?
One of the challenges is that the field house is in use for wellness classes, and the wellness classes are going to need more space than they traditionally do to spread out based on the guidance from the state and the requirements around the physical distancing and the different activities that can be done. Now, a lot of those activities may be outdoors, but we have 4 wellness teachers and 2 classrooms for wellness. Traditionally, 2 of the teachers are in the gym teaching, and the other 2 are in the classrooms teaching, and they teach during first and second lunch, and they typically take third lunch. So, there are a lot of those parameters that come into it as well. And then we do have a supervision and personnel issue about.
Lisa?
One thing that I don't think we've talked about is, so we don't have any kind of, this is a question for Keith, and he's going to be annoyed that I don't already know this. We don't have to transport any of the high school kids, right? It's only
True.
K to 8.
True.
Okay.
K to 6.
So we haven't talked about, this is the only school where we're shortening the school day, and are parents going to be able to pick up those kids who live further away in time to get them home? Or are we just assuming that if a parent has a problem picking up their child, that they're just going to stay at the high school? I'm wondering if this is putting an extra burden on working parents that we haven't thought through.
That's where I was going, Lisa, when I asked, had they estimated the percent of students that might need to stay? Because I think it's higher than we think for 9th and 10th graders. I just think it's, hard to assume that we're smack in the middle of the day that we're going to be able to lean on parents to transport them. That's my biggest concern with the way the schedule works. I understand why it was put together the way it was.
Yeah, and I know that other districts are struggling with this topic as well. Some districts are actually doing, I don't know the exact times, but midday dismissals for everyone. And so it's really like a half a day model, which puts a real burden on families. So we're trying to do the best with the, as we said, lemons to lemonade, the best that we can with what we have. And I really did push hard, and I know the team rallied to get that extra time on Wednesdays for that reason, because a lot of districts aren't able to do that safely. The field house, even if we could use some larger spaces, there was also that 25 maximum capacity at that 6 feet. That would include the teacher, or any support staff. So it probably doesn't buy us, even if we had other larger spaces, we still limited to the number of kids that could be in there safely.
Right. Yeah, there are no easy answers. So for everyone watching at home, there are no easy answers, but we are trying to ask all the questions.
So at this point, I think we're hitting a little bit of a wall and going down too many, we're getting in the weeds. So I'd like to sort of pause and move towards a different direction for the moment. I think that we've given some feedback. I ask that, the administrators take that and work, massage that through a little bit tomorrow. We do have another school committee meeting on Monday that we can further discuss this. Before the administrators are offered to leave for the evening, I wanted to open this up to them in case they needed to share any other information, sort of give them another opportunity to share information. So, Nicole, do you have anything else?
I can't imagine that anyone needs to hear me speak anymore this evening. So I'm going to mute myself. I am happy to answer questions, but I don't feel like I need to volunteer any more information at this point. So I'm going to mute myself.
Great, but thank you. Thank you, Nicole. We appreciate the conversation. Anybody else? Jamie?
I've received a few emails from incoming kindergarten parents about French immersion. And I believe I used the word debutante. And when I first came to Holliston and someone talked about debutante, I did have that moment of, are we thinking about when we're unveiling someone to society? I just wanted to let people know what a debutante was. And if I can share my screen, I'll put up that chart again so everyone can see it. So just again, to talk about French immersion, for families who are choosing the all remote option, we are not offering French for kindergarten, but those students can rejoin in first grade. So we've made that decision with Dominique Trotan, and that's when they become debutantes, when they join in first grade. So that's what that terminology is for those new to French immersion. The questions come to me a lot. Why are you having French immersion in kindergarten? And, I really trust our experts, our world language experts in Holliston. They've been doing this a long time. They've built this amazing program. And in conversations with Dominique Trotan, we've talked about that the proposed model is in person, 100% immersion. And we feel that we can keep that target language throughout and build a really strong experience. We did talk about in kindergarten, if the school committee asked us to do a hybrid model like the rest of the district, or if we had to move to all remote, during that time, that instruction would shift to 50% in French and 50% in English. And the English would be the math and the social emotional piece, but that 50% in French would be the language input piece, the conversation back and forth that children need to be able to develop the language. I think families are thinking back to crisis teaching and the struggles that families felt with French. In this model, the teacher will be supporting them in that schedule throughout the learning block. So we're shifting the burden from families that the teacher is going to be there to be able to support the students in that. So I think that there were some questions with that, and I just wanted to be able to answer that. Stacey, I didn't know if you had any other questions about that you wanted me to explain.
No, I don't. I know it was a hot topic, if you will, that we were getting some emails about it. I know that you spoke to people on the phone. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to say if you wanted to. So I appreciate it. I believe the other administrators did not have anything else to share. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I hope you understand that we appreciate what you're doing. We're not picking at you. We're just trying to all reach the same goal. So thank you all so very much. Good night. Susan, did you want to continue with this, or do you want to move towards talking about the proposed positions and then go back to more discussion about this? Or I know people at home are expecting us to make a vote tonight, and I don't think that's going to happen based on the conversation. So I guess I want to set expectation for people who are watching. Do you want to share the ideas, the proposed positions?
For the different positions that so we have a budget subcommittee meeting tomorrow to discuss some financial proposals. And I know that's a big question here, as conceptually, what we're asking school committee to consider, that conceptually, here's a model. The details cannot be all worked out because, as we've talked about, until we bargain the impact with our union members, until we have the financial impact. So that was our disclaimer that is true for all these types of plans. So I know that there's a concern here that we have not told the school committee what we think the financial impact has been. So I know that that is something we want to start delving into tomorrow in our budget subcommittee meeting. And I do think that our team, particularly Keith, Peter, and I, really talked today, and we do have some solid numbers that we can bring forward, estimated based on needs of students with this model, the additional luncheons, health and safety monitors, some additional custodial monitors, potentially some additional nurse coverages and things like that. So I will have those details tomorrow to start that conversation. And then that, I think, will help inform some of the conversation for you to help make a decision on Monday as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to thank you for doing that, Susan, Peter, and Keith. I think it's really important for the public to understand that, even for the school committee, this is coming at us rapid fire. And so as the plan was getting published earlier this week, I began reaching out on behalf of the budget subcommittee and the school committee to try to wrap our arms around the resources and staffing needs in particular. There are some additional costs related to other items as well. And, that's not something you swag in 10 minutes or maybe even in a week. But I think our goal is to understand, is it bigger than a bread box, smaller than a Mack truck, and where does that fit into the financial picture? We will have to lean on federal aid to subsidize any plan that we come up with. And it's critical for us to understand the scope of that. So I think tomorrow the budget subcommittee will begin looking at that. We'll have hopefully a perspective and point of view to share with the committee at large on Monday. And based on that, we will be hopefully in a position to recommend a vote or what have you on the plan. I do want to caution everybody on one thing, the public. Even by Monday, we're not going to have every detail to this thing vetted, but we are trying to meet a state deadline for submission. And the way I look at this is that we're submitting the draft term paper. Every district is required to submit it. And I don't think the state or anybody else is expecting it's necessarily final. So we will have time to sharpen our pencils and get everything final, and do that with everybody that has to set foot in the classroom to make it happen. So that will come. But Monday is our chance to get a closer look at the numbers on all of this.
So do we want to move on to some of the other things, or did you have more that you wanted me to speak to?
Can I just ask one more clarifying question before you? Sorry, this is just really quick. When we submit our plan, though, it's not like the department is going to come back with us like with a stamp of approval. It's just we have to do it. It's part of the process. It's not that they go, yes, you're approved to do this plan, or you're not. Right? It's just we have to say this is what we're looking towards doing, and then work towards that.
So what I heard today, obviously there's 500 to 600 of us on these meetings, so it's always could be misinterpreted. But what my understanding is that they're going to support us as much as possible with our plans, and help us work through some of those things that could be driven after that. The only thing that they will tell us, if they saw the plans and felt it was going in the wrong direction, we might get some feedback and asked to do something differently. But if they feel like we've covered the models that we were asked to cover, and certainly with the in-person piece in mind, that is the recommendation, to try to get in-person learning. I did have a slide that I was going to show you that they showed us today related to that. But yes, I think that is the goal, to try to have us get our plan in, knowing it's subject to change because of all these other pieces that we haven't been able to work through until we have a plan. And I have a strong feeling about that. We will be supported in that piece. I don't know if you want to put that slide up.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was a helpful slide today that we saw. Actually, hang on 1 second. Let's see if I get the right slide up. So 2 things. That's why the one I was just referring to. So now I got to find the right one. Too many slides. Let's see if I can enlarge that. So if you look at this slide here, the commissioner shared this, and I did ask him. He was kind enough to let us reach out to him with questions, and I asked if he could send it to me because I couldn't find it. It's Johns Hopkins University, and the reason why Massachusetts and the governor and the commissioner are saying that they really are encouraging us to try to be creative with how we can get in-person learning to our students is because if you look at Massachusetts on the left, in the green. So there are states that are trying to reopen and bring students back that are not in the green. The states that have positivity rates above 5% in the yellow are really not what Johns Hopkins research shows should be recommended to be going back. But some of them have done that, and some of those states are the ones that have had some more difficulty doing so. So the reason why we're getting this real sense of, based on the medical research, based on the phasing in of the state and the things that we've been doing, right now, Massachusetts is in that place where it is recommended that we should do our best social, emotionally, and academically for the in-person piece. So I thought that visual was helpful in that thinking as to why we're doing the work that we're doing and really trying to encourage this type of plan to go forward in that manner. And then I don't know if you'd like to see this other piece that I think, Stacy, I think you asked me to get this together, and Lynn was fabulous and shared. Okay, now I've got so many slides up here. Nope, that's not the one. I wonder if I lost it. I may have to look for it in a second because I think, oh no, here it is, sorry. So if you look at this chart, I know that was something else that some parents were trying to conceptually, and some of our school committee members, we were trying to really wrap our head around how to understand the model of what balance we find and what leads us to a decision on schools. And clearly the Board of Health, if there's a breakout in a COVID case, that is someone that we call immediately. But this model I thought was really helpful in the visual. One isolated case, school remains open, contact tracing and quarantine would happen. And then we find out if there were any other contact, and that's why we're trying to keep those cohorts very small. Multiple cases of COVID-19, Board of Health's involved. They reviewed the process, short period of time for cleaning, might close down for a few days. And then we have to consult with our commissioner at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And then we go to the next one, which is significant number of cases in the local municipality. So I don't want to really read through all of that. It's something I could share out later. I will read the detail if you want, but I just thought this visual was helpful to me to be able to see that a little bit more clearly, because parents and even ourselves, we're trying to wrap ourselves around what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. And that is part of the safety protocols we have to have in place, and safe places. If we have a child suspected or a staff member suspected of having an outbreak, having a safe place for them to go within the building as well, while we determine whether there is a risk factor involved. So this model is something that if the school committee likes, we can put that in as part of our planning for the purpose, that could add it into our actual proposal as well.
So thank you to Lynn for doing that. Thank you for sharing that tonight. Yes, if you could, to be honest with you, I can't see it very well.
I know, that's why what are you gonna say? Sorry.
I was gonna say, it's just tiny, so I can't read it, and I don't want you to read it out loud. Could you share it with us? And, we can offer feedback, but I do think we should include it. I think as much visual data that we can provide is helpful. And I also think, as I shared with you, so many people were asking about trigger points. Mm-hmm. What's going to trigger a closure? What's going to trigger full reopening? So I think this is a great start. And if you could share that with us, that would be great.
Sure. And Lynn did tell me she worked with her nurse. The nurses have been working on this model with her. They've been working on trying to get that to you, but they had already been starting that prior to that request. So I'll get that. She was very helpful, has always been very helpful in this process.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the Johns Hopkins slide as well.
You're welcome.
So at this point, we don't need to vote on it, but I would recommend that we not vote on the proposal this evening. I personally would like a little more information, some more fleshed out discussion about the high school. And then I know that Anne Louise had asked that we, pause and listen to the financial impact as well. So if everyone is okay with that, we can move on to the school calendar. Okay, any questions or anything? All right.
Real quick, what time did that meeting get posted for on Monday?
So at 9 o'clock. At first we thought it was going to be for 10, but it did make 9 o'clock, I was told.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So in and out, 15 minutes, we'll be all set. I'm kidding.
Catherine, you had a question?
I just wanted to reiterate again before we switch topics, and Cynthia said this already, but just so everybody out in the audience hears that this isn't like the final, stamp of approval and then we're done. Like, this is just like the first hurdle that we're going to go through, and that things can be changed and things can be tweaked. This is in no way written in stone. It's just that we have to approve it to keep going.
Agreed. It's really about, as I mentioned, it's conceptually, feasibly speaking and conceptually speaking, do we believe that this gives us what we can do to give our students in-person learning? If we believe in-person is the right balance here and the maximum amount, we feel it's the maximum amount of in-person learning we can give safely, and that's why we proposed it that way.
And Susan, I do think, I know I mentioned this earlier, but I do think we really need to move that disclaimer front and center, like even on the cover page or above the table of contents, and say, this plan is still subject to budget considerations as well as union negotiations, because I'm really afraid that if we approve this on Monday, people are going to be like, okay, this is it. We can bank on it. This is what we're doing. I'm going to make my plans around this. And that's really not the case. Unfortunately, for everyone watching at home, again, we are going to be tweaking things, responding to things for this, probably the entire school year. Like, there is no set plan in stone. Things are going to have to be flexible and have to change according to what COVID does, etc.
Yes, so we're going to talk about the first week only, staggered times, language on that, add the COVID-19 visual in the safety and health and safety piece, disclaimer up front. And I think those were the three main things I heard tonight.
Awesome, thank you.
So can you share your screen and let's go through the school calendar?
Sure. hopefully I have the right tabs with me. Let's see. It's always hard when you're on screen finding these things.
Don't worry, no pressure, no pressure.
Oh, there's lots of pressure. No. It's going to be hard to see it, but at least if I can talk to it, I think it's going to be fairly simple to explain what we're trying to do here with the calendar, because we did discuss it. So you really only need to see, because I'm trying to keep it big enough, the beginning of the calendar for now. And then I'll scroll out. We did have the commissioner worked with the various unions, AFT, MTA, and Boston Teachers Union, and they were able to come to agreement that because there is such a need to really do a robust instructional model, because it's, I mean, I think everybody knows that there was no way that we're going to be all in-person learning no matter what. So there's going to be a remote piece to the learning to some extent, either because students are coming out for health reasons fully, or because we're doing a blended hybrid model. So in order to do that successfully, teachers are asking and needing, and we also as administrators validate the need to do this extra training. So there was an ask to put 10 training/professional development days at the beginning of the year that administration would work together with the teachers to provide some of the needs around the hybrid model, around remote learning, and also around the safety measures that are involved with masks and things for teachers to deal with in students. And it might involve some behavioral components and what that looks like for students with the wearing of masks and so forth. So we haven't designed that instruction yet because this is just too recently has happened. But what it does mean is that we were asked to put 10 additional, or a total of 10 days at the beginning of the school year in order to do these additional trainings. So the first day for teachers is currently the 31st of August, which is an opening day, and it's part of the contract that they do receive opening day, and there's a specific expectation for that day. So we did not make that a training day right now. That means the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 14th, and 15th would give us 10 days front-loaded for professional development and training. And if we were trying to think about whether we could start on the 15th, but honestly, to do this correctly and allow the contractual day on the 31st, that would mean school would start on the 16th. And that is the day that the commissioner said to us, they really do want us to not start any later than the 16th. And districts may have to get a waiver if their calendar already started beyond that. So we're okay on that end if we propose the 16th as the first day for students. And what we wanted to do is not move the PD days, because a lot of our literacy instructional model that is being rolled out for next year, we already have some of the PD days embedded on the half days and full days. And to try to move that around, we might not be able to get the trainers. And we've got quite an investment in that fundamental process for our literacy in the elementary model. So keeping that in mind, we did not move any of the PD days that were in there prior to this. And also we did look at the calendar, and it's complicated, so I don't know if it'd be hard to explain it well, even visually, but the cohort A and cohort B model, we wanted to make sure those third day that they actually have in-person instruction every other week would be a balance, because some of those PD days and some of the holidays and things would then throw off our cohort A and cohort B. So for equity for those students, we then wanted to look at which days of the Wednesdays might move to cohort B or cohort A. So it's complicated, and I'm explaining this badly, and I apologize for that. We did do another look at what the yellows and the greens would be the in-person part for our cohort A, and the greens would be the in-person portion for our cohort B. And the reason I show you that is not to count up all the days. We counted up the days, but to make sure we weren't overburdening one cohort so they would lose out on some of those Wednesday in-persons, and that's where our balance comes in. But the biggest part is the really part that we have to vote on would be the first 10 days and the start date for students being the 16th, because we're not proposing any other changes to the student schedule. No.
And that, you might believe, you think you didn't explain that well. That was really good. And I thank you for that thorough approach to actually the method, I can't even speak, the methods that you use to look at making sure that there's equity. I do have a question. The 10 days, does that include all staff? Is it teachers? Is it paraprofessionals? Is it nursing staff? Can you clarify for us on that?
I'm drawing a blank on that. I believe it was the educators, but I don't want to misquote that. I'd have to look at the agreement, the MOA, and I don't have that in front of me. So if you could let me double check on that before I confirm that.
Yep, absolutely.
Is Keith still on the phone? Or
Yeah.
on the call? Yeah. I mean, wouldn't it have to be? I would think it would have to be some of the other.
Well, I mean, I think we certainly have training to do with our paraprofessionals too. I just don't remember if they were tied to the 10 days or not, so I'd have to look at that.
I mean, their contract calls for the 181 days in their contract, so they don't normally get the professional days. So we'd have to figure out what to do about the 4th of September. That's the only day that was an overlap. So.
Thank you.
I had a question, and the opening day for teachers is August 31st. Couldn't the professional days start on Monday, August 31st?
We started thinking down that road, and then Keith, knowing the contract better than I do, reminded me that that day is in the contract as so Keith, I'm sorry, you have the wording. I didn't.
No, that's okay. I can look at the contract myself too, but I appreciate that you guys reviewed that and noted that in it. I had heard, and again, it was just off of a Metro West article about Natick School Committee contemplating whether all 10 planning days had to be used up at the front of the year. We suspect that we will pivot, we may pivot into a different plan, hopefully full. Maybe it'll be into remote. But do we not have a sense that, you want some money in the bank, that you want to reserve 2, 3, 4, 5 of these planning days for a time when we pivot into a different program?
And the meetings that we've had with Commissioner, this is where it gets very tricky, because I think I'm hearing one thing sometimes that someone else thinks they're hearing it. Again, when there's 500 people on and these meetings move very fast, it sounded like there was really this expectation to front load them. And I haven't heard differently, but I'm certainly open to be corrected if I misunderstood that, because it seems like most districts have been putting it at the beginning, because the teachers really feel the need to have that training early on and get them into the process to delve into the hybrid and really to give them a robust blended model, because we haven't done a model like this before. Anne Louise?
So I think the major concern with students starting later is that there's a potential to end up having to close school, and then they end up with fewer days, fewer live days. I'm sorry, fewer in-person days before that potential shutdown might happen as the cold weather winter sets in. So, we're down to the wire. There's not a lot of time to say, hey, let's start sooner with everything. But I think that's the concern. So I guess that would be one of the things I'd want to, I totally understand why the teachers want that additional time, but can you pull the calendar back up there, Keith?
Oh, yeah. 1 second.
I was wondering if it could be, sorry, because I'm not looking at it. Because of the 31st and the 4th, we end up sort of bleeding into that third week and starting on a Wednesday, but we're even just a few days earlier, starting on a Monday. I don't know. It just feels like it would make more sense.
I do think this is something that's pretty universally being recognized by districts out of respect for the concern of teachers to really be able to open both safely and effectively. And that's why the commissioner has, he's not doing much as a blanket thing across the state in these 10 days, and allowing for that 170 is something that he has done. So I think, we could certainly look at our day here or two, but I think we would be an outlier as far as, I think.
Not giving the 10 days. Okay.
Yeah, I think, there's some things that we're going to want to hold firm on. And there's other things that, I think we could see the benefit we might want to stay.
Yeah, and
I certainly wouldn't want to shortchange. I don't want to shortchange the prep time that's needed to do this well, and get everybody comfortable. And I guess it's not possible to start it sooner than.
Dawn?
And I just want to make sure the original calendar we voted on had a professional development day on September 4th. When did we move that to?
So because that was already there, we didn't move that and make an additional day. We embedded that in the 10.
Okay, but we could, so then there's actually 11 professional development days?
No. Because we already had a professional day embedded in the beginning, we encompassed that in the full 10. So we added an additional 9.
Got it.
Because we're trying to, it's actually a win-win for the students because we're not trying to disrupt another day later in the year.
Got it. And what about the October 9th professional day that we have? I know no one has a crystal ball, but I truly think a professional development day, if we end up in a different mode, could be really helpful. Do we think whether it's November, December, do we want to leave the professional development day of October 9th or is your
that? I think
you do want to leave it?
Hang on, I'm just going to pull up the calendar again.
We've left the remaining professional days, whether they be half days or full days, where they are, in order to be able to prepare for shifts that occur throughout the year and just continue ongoing professional development.
And it's hard to see, but let's see if you can. There you go. Can you see that now?
Yep.
October 9th is still, we didn't remove any, we left it because we really didn't want to disrupt the calendar that was already approved. We thought about moving the Friday PD days to Wednesdays because we have that Wednesday model for the hybrid built in, but then it would disrupt the days that were already allotted and paid for the PDs, particularly at the elementary models with the new literacy program coming in. So we really tried to do the minimal disruptions to the calendar.
Okay, so some of that professional development has already been paid for and calendared. Is that correct? And so that's why some of it can't be moved at this point?
Correct. The half days and the full days were allotted really for that literacy program because it's a very robust change for teachers and really it's very important for that academic balance, even though our driver for these changes is health and safety initially.
Plus, I think the reasons we have days throughout the year is for the need for ongoing professional development. I think this year that need is going to be greater than ever. So to shift from that, as much as we want to have kids in person as much as possible, we're going to need to continuously reassess or perhaps toggle to a fully remote or a more in-person model. So to have those professional developments along with the literacy aspects are critical.
Right, so we left all those the same. October 9th is a half-day early release. Then November 3rd is a full-day professional development. December 9th, half-day early release, professional development. It's so hard to see the calendar this way when you don't have the whole thing. January 15th is a full-day professional development for teachers. February 10th, half-day professional development. March 19th, half-day. And I think that's it. So that's a good thing that we have some embedded strategies throughout the year as well. And we wanted to leave that intact.
And Susan, I don't know if you mentioned it. I don't think I heard it, but the one thing of removing that Friday from being a professional development day is we ended up with 172nd day of instruction.
Yes, thank you, because I meant to scroll down. You can see on the bottom right, we had initially, because the teacher work year has not changed. They are still 185 days. And we initially had 171 days for students. And in the 10 days at the beginning with one of them was already existing, now gives us 172 days for students. And I know that can lead to potential additional time for students on learning that we were concerned about losing earlier in the other models. At 170, so it's two additional days for students are built in that way.
Are there any other questions, Susan, you can see because you shared the screen? Anyone else have any other questions?
I do. I just wanted to share that I was looking at the letter that we got from the desktop of Jeff Riley, and it did say that the discussions he's announced were that the school districts will have 10 additional days at the start of the 2020-2021 school year to prepare for the reopening of schools. So I think it was pretty clear that that's what he was requesting. So I just found the letter. Just wanted
Thank you. That was my recollection, but I had too many other tabs open.
Me too. I know. And I was like, let me find that because I wanted to just clarify that. Thank you.
And Dawn, for you, the language about the opening day is on page 37 of the contract.
So at this point, I'm looking for a vote just to update the school year calendar 2020 to 2021 to have teachers start on August 31st and students to begin on, is it Tuesday, September 16th?
Wednesday, September 16th, right?
Wednesday, September.
Yes.
Moved by Lisa.
Seconded by Andy.
Wait, hold on. I just want to ask one clarifying question because I missed it. So are we including the paras as well in the first 10 days and the nursing?
It would be some of those days. We have to look at their schedule because as Keith pointed out, the 181, so they might be there for some of those days. I don't want to firm that up until we know what the needs for paras are as well.
All right. Thank you. Because I was taking notes. So moved by Lisa, seconded by Andy. All in favor, roll call vote. Mrs. Listevnik?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Sorry, yes.
Ms. Koshin?
Yes.
Dr. Savard?
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead?
Yes.
Ms. Naborski?
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi? Yes. Great. Thank you. All right. Dr. Botello, last but certainly not least, you have some anti-bias training you want to share with us?
Yeah, it's an update on our efforts around equity and anti-bias. Obviously, we've been pretty consumed with just making sure that we have all of our kids returning, but we wanted to report the progress we're making. To begin with, we last summer we had the admin group worked with Kaisha Lamb from Assabet Valley Collaborative around issues of equity and race, and then we also were, as I mentioned previously, in the midst of a 3-day training in March when schools closed. We're looking forward to, we had finished 2 days, we're looking forward to that 3rd day, which hasn't been rescheduled yet. Thanks to Dr. Kuska, during our admin treat this summer, Dr. Janelle Pearson, who's a social justice and equity speaker, came in to meet with us and speak with us, and we spent an afternoon talking about equity and anti-bias and anti-racism, especially looking at how do these issues, really impact our thinking about reopening and how we serve kids and how we ensure that we are making learning successful for all students, but being particularly careful about students who come from traditionally marginalized groups or who might have other hurdles around language acquisition and such that really we need to attend to. So those conversations were very good and kind of led us into some planning with regard to that. I had mentioned previously that we are developing a Holliston equity and anti-bias team. There's about 8 staff members per school, about 32 to 35 folks that express interest in joining that team. We're developing right now a leadership group because that's a very big group. And so it's going to start with myself, Karen Archambault, from the high school, who's deeply passionate about this work, as any of you are involved with her interview process as the assistant principal at the high school. She's very invested in this work and has done a lot in her previous districts. David Jordan, Dave Keim, and Jamie Slaney. We are now going to be reaching out to parents to get a parent representative from each school to be part of that leadership team. So it'll be one per school, and then one individual that's either could be a parent or just could be a community at large member who's interested in working with us. We also, in this next recruiting portion, will be recruiting 2 high school students to be on the leadership team of this overall anti-bias team. The next phase will be to, again, bring at least 1 teacher per school. And so that will be kind of the leadership team, and they'll be working with the other, 28 members throughout the district to kind of help lead these efforts. But we want to have a small group that can kind of meet more regularly and discuss kind of the big picture and help to inform our work. And we wanted that group to be representative of parents, as well as teachers and administrators and students. There's also the possibility, I'm going to talk to Mr. Jordan about a couple of middle school students as well, because I know from being a middle school educator myself that our middle school kids are passionate and are mature beyond their years and would love to be involved with these efforts as well. So again, we'll be trying to figure out the timing, but it will be soon. But I don't want it to intersect with too many other surveys and recruiting efforts that we have, but reach out to get those parent representatives on board this summer, as well as those high school students.
And not to extend the conversation, because I know it's getting very late, but just 2 quick things that I forgot, because I knew Peter was doing this tonight, but we haven't had time to talk about this topic just because of all the other work we're doing. But I'm very excited to also, I may have mentioned it earlier in the year, in my first month here, Mass Partnership for Diversity in Education is a group that I had worked with in my previous district, and I am filling out a form to join that group as well. They really are a very good resource at the state level, and I've attended meetings in the past, and their goal is to help us come up with better ways to have more, to increase diversity in our educator staff, doing job fairs and different things. So I can talk more about that later, but I am in the process of signing up to partner with them and attend those meetings, or possibly Peter would attend those meetings. And then the other piece I did just send to all of you, that friend of mine, Janelle Pearson, who's doing some work on equity. I partnered her up. I had met with, I can't think of the person's name right now, but for Mass Youth Partnerships, is doing a lot of work around equity and a lot of webinars. So I just sent you the email to Massachusetts Partnership for Youth, Inc. We're partnering with them, and my friend Janelle Pearson, I partnered her up with them, and she is going to present a webinar for them. And I did send that all out to our staff that they can attend these webinars for free. So take a look at that yourself. It might be something you're interested in, but just really trying to get the word out and do as much as we can to give opportunities for staff and also richer opportunities for the district to try to get some more diverse learning experiences for students in the district as well.
Yeah, so building upon what Dr. Kusko is mentioning, we do, as I mentioned, have a lot of summer curriculum work going on. It's especially going on in August, just because a great deal of the work was kind of working towards, preparing for a hybrid model, but we also had lots of proposals that were related to these issues. So we have a meeting diversity with multicultural literature approach in high school English. That's a group of English teachers at the high school who are diving into that. A proposal called Complicating the Canon. It's about diversifying literature, especially in AP literature. That's Becky McLean is working on that. Increasing diversity and marginalized voices in the high school social studies. So there's a group of social studies teachers at the high school who are digging into that. Examining bias at RAMS and exploring anti-racism educational resources. So that's a group of representatives from every grade level at the middle school and from the English, social studies, and science department to put forth a proposal to dig into these issues about how to examine what they're currently doing and how they can expand and enhance those issues within their courses. The civics is a civics curriculum development work going on, and they're looking at, they already have brought some of these issues in through whether it's looking at court cases or other civics-oriented events. And so they're looking at how that they can build upon that, as well as dig into more current issues that are going on with respect to race and its intersection with our civic lives and government policies. grade 6 social studies is looking at it. There's also an English group at the middle school who read the book Watson's Go to Birmingham, and that's they've already, in previous times built in issues of race in, but they want to enhance and really kind of make those more powerful and connect those even more directly from the past to the present, which is part of the kind of the model at the middle school and the high school already. There's a grade 5 social studies group that is looking at how do they enhance the look at issues of civil rights and race in the grade 5 social studies curriculum. There's an elementary art group that's looking at promoting racial awareness through art. And then also there's a lot of work on Fountas Pinnell Classroom and developing units of study aligned to that, and how do they ensure that the literature choices that they have are really bringing to life diverse, voices, which is built into the selections, which is great. So they don't have to go, searching, because that's one of the strengths of that program was the diverse text selections that are part of that. But then they're going to see how that kind of lines up and how they can enhance those conversations, as well as just the exposure that kids have through our literacy program. So all that work was proposed by teachers, sure, with our encouragement, but so there's lots of work going on this summer already to make movement in that direction. Next year, obviously, we're going to have to, work with our curriculum council, which is our instructional leaders throughout the district. That means our department leaders at the high school and our curriculum specialists at the middle school and the elementary schools. And we'll be doing lots of work to prepare our hybrid model. And the other important topic that will be the heart of our work in Curriculum Council next year and beyond will be around race and diversity. And so part of that will be, we've talked about, we're going to do some training at the beginning of the year that allows teachers to examine their curriculum for bias. There's some really good resources by it's called the Sadler Institute, but also it was adapted. Wellesley Public Schools put out a really good resource on how to go about examining curriculum resources. So we're going to be using some of theirs, as well as developing a training that really allows our teachers to identify bias, but also, as importantly, helping our teachers to help our students to be looking for those issues and encouraging them to. So I think the power of a teacher looking for bias within curriculum or within topics that we're studying is obviously really important, but we want to really develop the skills where our kids are encouraged to ask questions and to question things and to promote diverse perspectives as well, to empower them to be not only the consumers of more diverse perspectives, but the people who are pushing for making sure that the whole story is told and not just the master narrative, as Takaki labels it. So that's some stuff around curriculum. Dr. Kuska mentioned one professional development opportunity. There also is another one that's actually happening this weekend, which I shared with staff. It's a anti-racism training for educators being offered and hosted it's online, but through Newton Public Schools. And it's based on the work of Bettina Love, a leading expert on abolitionist education. So I already had at least a couple of teachers who are going to participate in that. I think it's on Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, and Monday and Thursday.
8th to the 13th. I think it was August 8th to 13th. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are the kind of the most important initiatives that are going on now, and then we'll be kind of building on that at the beginning of the year. Again, one of the things I mentioned previously is really developing systems to kind of be able to evaluate how equitable our education is and how successful we are with all groups within our community. So that's a system that we'll be working on at the beginning of the year. That's going to look at what criteria really help us to measure that. So that's something that's in the future.
Peter, what else can we put on your plate? That was great. Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you
welcome.
for that. I know you've been working all night and day. Catherine?
I was just thinking, that I would love to see a community integration piece to this too. You know, like there's often a like a town-wide book that everybody reads together from the library, or you know, sometimes the local bookstore will say like, this is the book club coming. That if we could, again, to put one more thing on your plate, somehow integrate it into the community a bit more, so that it's not school specific, but that it brings in parents and community members and the library and local bookstores, and you know, have it be extending out into the community a bit purposefully.
Yeah, I think part of the reason for kind of creating that group that includes parents as well is I think we can together develop some of those initiatives. I'm also meeting with diverse Holliston members next week, but I think that would be great, whether it's a book group that is, you know, it could be led by us or it could be led by some group in the community that I know a bunch of our educators and our leaders would be interested in participating in. Probably our leaders not right this second, though I know I've read a couple books. I read Waking Up White this summer and How to Be an Anti-Racist, and try to read some of that reading that I hadn't read before. But I think it would be a great idea to do that in that way.
Well, and it doesn't have to be a book that just, because there's often a community book, that's the first thing I thought of, but there happens to be a lot of podcasts that are, you know, I don't know if you listen to Serial, but there's a new Serial one that's out there now. And so, you know, if that could be integrated, because I don't read that much anymore. I listen to a lot of books. So there's a place for books and, you know, podcasts and all that stuff in there too. So
yeah, the Daily has done some great, I don't know if you know the Daily, that podcast. They've done some great work on these issues as well as on COVID issues as well. But yeah.
And Serial's new one is Nice White Parents, which might be relevant.
Cool.
I know that Lisa had talked to me about the diversity group as well, and I think I'm certainly very open to working with them as well. And I did say that we want to put some dates on the calendar with them, but probably not putting them on until January, just to get over the hurdle of the beginning of the year. Normally we wouldn't put it off that long, but I think when Peter goes next week, and maybe I'll be able to go at another date, we could talk about some of those dates and what they might look like to partner with them.
Lisa?
Unmute. So I just wanted to first say thank you. I felt so guilty asking about this a month or so ago whenever I started. I don't even remember, Peter, when we started emailing a little bit more frequently, but it was, you know, right smack dab in the middle of pandemic planning. And I think it's really commendable that, I mean, you've done so much work around this, and I really want to thank you. I know that you care a lot about this work. So I'm just really happy that we're doing all of this. So one quick question and one quick comment. This new group that's going to have a couple of high school students and maybe some middle school students and a parent rep from each school, is their charge going to be primarily around curriculum, or do you see it as broader than that? Is it about looking at bias in the curriculum specifically, or is it more of, is it going to be sort of more open to brainstorming, you know,
I see
other big picture ideas?
I see it more as broader. I think it might help inform some of the work that we dig into with curriculum. I think our curriculum leadership will be really the heart of that, digging into the curriculum and helping to train teachers at large to do some of that critical analysis. So I think this group will help to inform, what they think might be our most critical next steps, as well as, help to, like I developed an initial plan that I shared ideas with at the beginning that have all these different elements. And it would be great for them to, critique that plan and help to, revise it, as well as help us to decide like what are the most critical steps that we can take to really, impact our education and our kids, as well as, some of these broader opportunities we have that Dr. Savard was saying, as far as us, kind of partnering with the community at large to, tackle these issues as a community, because obviously that has tremendous impact on our kids when they see that, adults and kids together are discussing the issues, and not just in schools. I know my kids, I have an 8 and 10-year-old, and we dig into these issues at home, and they're very excited and also dismayed by excited to be part of the solution and dismayed by what's going on. And so we want to broaden this beyond the community. And I think that group, which has parents in a community at large member, as well as a student who is a part of the school but also is part of Holliston, will look at things broadly.
And I know that the one comment I wanted to make was for people who don't know, I know Stacy knows this, and I know you know this, Dr. Patello, but Diverse Holliston is starting to work with Mindshare so that they can develop some parent education around these issues too, which is great. That's a wonderful partnership. So
yeah, I think so. Part of that, is this group talking with Mindshare. I'm sure some of our representatives on this team will be from Diverse Holliston, just knowing about their passion. We want to open it up to anyone in the community who may or not be part of that, but that you're working in partnership with Mindshare, I think would be great to kind of develop some events that go beyond the school, as well as support the schools inside the school.
Yeah, this is great. So thank you. And I look forward to continuing to work with you and Diverse Holliston on all of this.
Great. And I had the opportunity, we were all invited to join the administrators when Dr. Janelle Pearson Campbell came in, and I was able to make that, and I really enjoyed her. And I could listen to her all day. I just thought she was one of those people that you just could sit and talk to. So I would love to see her come visit us again too. So thank you for that. Any other questions for Peter or Dawn? You had one more question?
I did, Stace. If we're able to move back to the health and safety monitor, I guess my question, because I recognize we're not voting on that part tonight, but it, as listed, it is while we are in hybrid or full in person. What happens for a period of time if we ever have to transition into remote? What would the health and safety monitor do? Do we have an alternative? Are they only employed during periods when we're in person, or do we have an alternative description for them?
Well, I think that's actually a bigger question, because what happens to a lot of positions if we go full remote? If we're not serving lunch, there's a partial lunch. I mean, there's a lunch that needs to go out to the community. So I think that's a bigger discussion even beyond just the health and safety monitors, because a full year remote model, if it were to be so, encompasses many positions that would not be, maybe have positions available at the school level because of that.
Dawn, if I may, Susan, add to that. This is one of the reasons that I really wanted to take a look at this before we voted, because it's not just a question of which positions we may need to hire, it's how we hire them and how we fund them. So some positions could be hired as contract labor as opposed to full-time employees, and that makes a difference at a host of levels, one of which is if and when we pivot to another model, potentially remote, and we don't require their services, then we're not terminating full-time employees if we're contract, et cetera. And unemployment costs are attached to this as well for the town. So we need to understand what we're taking on, especially if it's short term. I mean, the world could get a whole lot better. The vaccine will come out, and next thing you know, we don't need any of the additional resources either. So these costs are sort of multi-layered, and we need to understand exactly how we're resourcing different personnel and what the implications are, not only financially, but contractually. So that's complicated.
We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, and help, because there is a limitation to contracted services. Not to bore you with the details, but we are required to provide benefits for staff members if we employ them and they're working a certain amount of hours. Contracted services would go into another service provider that would provide the benefits. So we don't, we may not have the opportunity to do that in the manner that you're thinking. We may still have to provide.
No, I'm not assuming anything. I'm just saying, depending on which positions we're talking about, we may or may not have that opportunity. And if we don't, then we've got to understand the fully loaded cost of taking on those staff, as well as the contractual obligations that might go along with it. And the fact that any potential outside funding may run out on December 31st. So it is complicated. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, just need to share with you the warrants that have been signed since our last meeting. There was a cafeteria bill in the amount of $4,790.22. An activity account replenishment at the middle school for $11,038.80. There is a school bill warrant in the amount of $67,189.11. School bill warrant in the amount of $120,464.30. And finally, a school bill warrant in the amount of $113,370.05. Our next meeting is, oh, sorry, Keith.
I just wanted to tell the committee, because they did approve the process. When you mentioned the cafeteria warrant, I realized that it was something I was going to mention earlier. The lunch program this summer, remember we had Ashland come in and we did those things. We actually made money, so it was a good thing. So,
thank you, and thank you again to Susan and her staff for that. So our next meeting is Monday, August 10th at 9 a.m. and our hopefully full agenda item will be district plans, the proposal for reopening, for which we will make a vote. With that being said, it is 10:15. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Dawn.
Seconded by Cynthia.
Moved by Dawn, seconded by Cynthia. All in favor, Mrs. Listevnik.
Yes.
Mr. Morton.
Yes.
Ms. Koshin.
Yes.
Dr. Savard.
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead.
Yes.
Ms. Naborski.
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. It is 10:16. We are now adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night. Happy birthday, Andy. Safe travels, Ann Louise.
Birthday.
Have a great weekend.
Happy
See you guys
birthday.
Monday.
Thanks. Bye.